Board of Appeals meeting. Ready? So we'll all rise for the pledge of
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Susie, if you could do roll call, please.
Board Member Groves.
Here.
Board Member Chambers.
Here.
Board Member Yankovic.
Here.
Board Member DeVore.
Here.
And Chair Salzweedl.
Here. I'll look for approval of the agenda presented.
So moved.
Four. Got that? We'll get back to that, Susie.
Board Member Groves.
Yes.
Board Member DeVore.
Yes.
Board Member Yankovic.
Yes.
Board Member Chambers.
Yes.
And Chair Salzweedl.
Yes. Citizens' comments for items not on the agenda. I don't see any, so we'll get on to new business. Public hearing on variance request 2212 G Drive. Mike, you want to tell them or just hand it right over to Andy?
Right over to Andy, go.
Go ahead, Andy.
Good evening. So we are here because applicants Bertie and Carolyn, I messed this up, have requested a variance to construct an accessory building at 2212 G Drive. So your zoning ordinance limits the size of accessory buildings to 1,200 square feet if you have more than a certain amount of lot area. In this case, they have like 10 acres and they're seeking 2,000 square feet. The upper limit of your zoning ordinance is 1,200. And so what they're asking for is basically an 800 square foot variance in terms of the area of the building. Other provisions of the zoning ordinance would be met. I don't know if the applicant's here, but certainly they would be welcome to come up here and explain further what they want to do with the property. But that's, you know, the gist of the application. They are going to be using it for just general personal use, I guess, from the looks of the application. So as we look at a variance, there are several standards in the zoning ordinance we have to apply. We've been through this a few times before with you guys over the years where basically we need to find that there's some unique circumstance or something different or unusual about the property that would warrant the need for a variance. So Mr. Chair, do you want me to hang tight and see if the applicant has anything to add to this before?
Are they here tonight?
Standards?
Oh, there she is. Oh, okay. Did you have anything you want to add?
I guess that the fact that we have 11.5 acres, it's not like the typical city lot where all the houses are next to each other. I don't really think it will disrupt or do anything, you know, for the bad for the neighborhood. I think it'll actually improve it, so we don't have clutter and things in our driveway, and we have area to store our boat in the winter, and then in the summer and things, you know, our children will use it. And we can also have pool items in there and a half-court basketball hoop. And to do that, the three-point line is 23 feet. So then you also have space to be able to play around that and shoot. And then eventually they won't be using that anymore. And then we can store our boat in there. And I have to put the blue wrap on it and then have it in our driveway and, you know, just keep it nice. And I just don't think it would be a problem. It's going to be tucked behind our house. So we're down the hill. And I have pictures. I don't know if you saw.
Yeah, I think we have.
You have all that where we want to put it. And we didn't have to cut any trees down to do it. And it would just make things nicer for us to have somewhere to store.
Were you planning on extending it a drive down too, or just
No.
the path at this point?
Our fence currently, our backyard is fenced in. We never cemented the posts, so we can just pop it out, and then you can drive down in there and
Okay.
put the, we don't want to have a driveway going through our backyard. And we can't go on the other side of our house anyway, because our septic tank and everything is over there. So I'm trying to kind of keep the kids wrangled in the backyard down the hill and not disturb the neighbors, because they like to blast the radio outside. You know, it's just things like that, and just to be more convenient and keep it nice. And I don't see that would be a problem, you know, with the lot size, or that it's going to obstruct anyone's view or anything like that.
Any other questions?
There's any other?
No, I drove by there today and where they're asking for that building, and you're never gonna see it.
Yeah.
With all the trees and everything, and you're right, you are down. It's amazing to me that there are lots 11 and a half and bigger still in this town, so.
Down in there? Yeah, our neighborhood
Kind of
says
amazing.
13, I think,
Yeah,
and then 11, and then they kind of get a few smaller ones, but they all have accessory buildings also. I think it's a 3-car garage next door, and you can't even tell, because there's so many trees, too. It's kind of, everything's kind of tucked down and hidden.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Andy, I guess we'll just go through one and we'll talk about it and go down to 2 and we'll discuss it. And hopefully go ahead.
Yes, we'll just start at the top of the list. So there are 6 standards in the zoning ordinance. You have to find that all of them are met if you're going to grant the variance. So we'll just start, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's kind of long and cumbersome, but the first one basically says that there's are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances surrounding the property that make compliance, kind of practically difficult. And so basically with something like this, in order to grant a variance, the ordinance is looking for the board to find there's something unique or different or unusual about the property that makes it different from other properties in the district, that makes complying with the zoning ordinance, unusually difficult. It would end up with some kind of hardship for the person seeking to build the building. The second standard talks about whether or not the specific piece of property or whether the condition is so general that it wouldn't make more sense just to amend the ordinance instead. This one I think has there's some merit to it. So because this is a large property, there aren't a lot of 10-acre properties in the city, as you know, but there are some. A lot of the properties in your SR district are a little bit bigger, 2, 3, 4 acres in a few cases. So it might make sense to ask the planning commission to look at amending the upper limits of your zoning ordinance to see if there's a way to allow for a larger building in certain circumstances. Right now, there's kind of a cutoff, I think, at 9,000 square feet. So if your lot is fewer than 9,000 square feet, the limit on the size of your accessory building is like 960 square feet. If you have over 9,000 square feet, your limit is 1,200. Doesn't matter if you're 1 square foot over 9,000 or 10 acres over 9,000. It's all the same standard, right? So it's just that 1,200 square feet is the limit for anything over 9,000. The third standard is whether or not it's necessary for the preservation of a substantial property right enjoyed by others in the district. So if all your neighbors have great big accessory buildings, then it might make sense to allow for this person to have one as well. We did a little bit of research on that, and as did the applicant, they provided some information, which we've summarized in a table here for you. Number 4, whether it would be detrimental to adjacent property in the surrounding neighborhood. Number 5, would it impair the intent and purpose of the ordinance. Number 6, if it was a self-created hardship. So is the condition that's causing the difficulty caused by the applicant? And it happens from time to time. So in our opinion, we think that most of these standards that are met, the only 2 that are kind of questionable in my opinion are the first 2. That being, is there something about the property that is unique that makes compliance extraordinarily difficult? I think this is a situation where compliance, is an option. It's just not ideal, obviously, for the applicant. They're going to end up with probably some stuff stored outside, which might be less desirable for the city in that instance. And then number 2, like I talked about, this is something that might warrant an amendment to the zoning ordinance instead. But again, this isn't something that we've been here before in the last 10 years, so it's not like it comes up every day either. So I think those are kind of the 2 that are probably the most important for you to focus on this evening as you kind of walk through the standards. And if there's any questions, of course, feel free to ask. So as you work through this, I think you should kind of go through each one, discuss each of those standards briefly, come to a consensus whether or not it's met, and then once you do that, you can make a decision at the end of the process. Are there any questions?
None. Start with number 1, I guess, Andy.
Yeah. So what we wrote here is that, so the applicant states around 11.6 acres, which is larger than a typical city lot, and the imposition of the same 1,200 square foot limitation for accessory buildings on a half acre versus 15, that seems illogical. However, the standard also states that the property must have a physical characteristics that makes the literal enforcement of the zoning ordinance practically difficult. That might be tough to prove because it's perfectly possible for them to construct a smaller building. So the question is it reasonable or practical to make the applicant do that? And I think that's kind of the question for you all is, do you want to, is it reasonable or is it practical to have the board require the applicant to just build a smaller building and deal with the standard until such time that the planning commission amends the ordinance if they opt to make that change and submit it to you guys. These aren't super easy questions, so.
The way can we talk now?
Yes.
As far as number one, what comes to my mind is, and I don't know if it's the right attitude, but spirit of the law versus letter of the law. I mean, I think the ordinance is to prevent people from doing stupid things on their property that would be visually unappealing or encroaching on their neighbors in some way, shape, or form. And I don't have a problem voting on to let them do this according to the first standard. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, so you're saying you're okay with a 2,000 square foot
Yeah,
building
I
being
mean,
built
they're
on
on
11 acres? or
11 acres.
Well, 11 acres means more stuff, more lawn maintenance stuff, more everything to store. And
If I lived next to them, I'd rather look at a building than their boat
Right.
shrink wrapped and
then the kids are inside too, so they're allowed, I would have pushed for a hockey rink over a basketball court, but that's not.
How long is your boat?
34 feet?
Yep, that's a lot to shrink wrap.
But that comes at a cost too, right? So now they can just wheel it inside if they have to do work over the winter or. I feel like they met the spirit of the first standard.
Yeah. And sitting on planning, I guess, I never realized we had properties this big.
There aren't many, but there's a few dozen probably.
And I think taking a look at it on planning and eventually changing it probably would be more.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get a lot of requests for them, but, I can see, especially in instances where they're well screened by mature trees and things like that. I think we're right in front on a city lot. We have, 8,000 or 12,000 square feet, and we don't want to see a 2,400 square foot mobile building back there.
The couple of dozen that you're talking about, that's not all residential, right? You're talking.
Yeah, it's residential, so we're primarily looking at, there's some on G Drive, there'd be some up in the northeast corner of the township, off of like Greenville, Fun, in that area. There's a few, not 10 acres, but.
Yeah, they're 5 acres.
Yeah, they're,
Yeah.
2 to 5, something where being a little more generous might make some sense. We haven't researched this in great detail beyond what we did for tonight, but that could be something that would be worth the planning commission looking at. And before we get all the way through these and you guys make a decision, I just want to remind you that there's a public hearing, so at some point you should open for public comment and take public comment if this was noticed to everybody within 300 feet.
Number 2, Andy?
So number 2, and we're kind of already there, but the condition or situation is not so general or recurrent of nature as to make reasonably practical the formulation of a general regulation. So in other words, amend the ordinance instead of granting the variance. So we haven't done many of these variance requests. I mean, we don't do very many variances, period. I'm here for this one, twice a year at that. So I don't think it's an issue of you guys are here granting the same variance over and over again. But this, I do think perhaps this is something where, again, we can see this coming up again because you do have a number of properties in the city where you would look at this and say, yeah, why don't we just let someone go a little bit bigger than 1,200 square feet? Not bigger necessarily, but if it's well screened, if it's down a hill or in the backyard and nobody can see it, and they're gonna keep all their stuff inside instead of outside, kind of like what the applicant's talking about here. I can see that making some sense potentially.
Any questions? I would like to at least have the planning commission revisit it.
Yeah, so Andy, if you could kind of compile how many properties that would encompass for the next week. Can you do it by Monday or?
It'd probably be for the June meeting.
Okay. Jeez.
Well, I'd like to also consider maybe lots that are 5 acres or less too, what size building that is also,
Yeah.
not just because it's a 10 acre and we're gonna grant 2,000, maybe there needs to be some restrictions on 5 acres or 4
Yeah.
acre parcels as well as, because somebody has 10 or 12.
Yeah, and I mean, accessory buildings can be challenging anyways, probably more so in townships than in cities, but in townships, we see requests for really, really, really big buildings. So I don't necessarily want to open that door here, but I think, you know, adding one more kind of tier to what you have here, that you have 960 if you're below 9,000, 1,200 if you're above 9,000. If you added one more, you to go a little bit bigger if you're more than, I don't know, an acre or something, that might make sense to me. But again, it's worthy of discussion.
Okay. Next one, Andy?
Number 3 is asks whether it's necessary for the preservation of a substantial property rate that's enjoyed by others in the district. So this basically asks, does everyone else around you have the same size building or larger? We put together a little table here where we, as best we could, measured what was on the ground. There are a bunch of them around them, and the applicant highlighted that in their submittal. There's one that looks like they're probably over the 2,000 square foot mark. Everyone else is probably in compliance insofar as I can tell, based on just looking at measuring off of aerial photos and looking at the BSNA information that we have available to us. So most of the properties around comply. There's at least one, maybe a couple more, where if you add up the area of several smaller buildings, you might get to something where you're approaching 2,000 square feet. But most of the strong buildings comply.
Any questions on 3? We'll go to 4.
4, would it be detrimental to adjacent property in the surrounding neighborhood? In this case, I think for reasons you stated, our feeling was probably not. It's well screened, it's tucked away from the road, and no one's going to be able to see it. So we don't think that there's going to be a major issue, and particularly because also there's a lot of unbuildable land on that property as well, where we're not anticipating adjacent developing popping up next door in the next 5 years or something like that, where it could be a problem in the future. I don't see this property changing a whole lot over time. It's going to stay kind of tucked back in the woods, and so for those reasons, we don't think that it would be detrimental to the surrounding properties.
Any questions? We'll go on to 5 then.
Number 5, would it impair the intent and purpose of the ordinance? Probably not, unless, I would argue that if you're going to, grant a variance without a good reason for it, then that would kind of impair the intent and purpose of the ordinance. But in and of itself, no, I don't think this does.
Questions? We'll go on to number 6.
Then number 6, and the last one, is whether or not this is a self-created hardship. So did the applicant create for themselves the difficult situation? Again, in this case, probably not. It's a little difficult for us to identify a hardship, but this isn't something where they, have arranged their buildings on the site in a certain way that makes this unnecessarily difficult. So we're not sure if there's a hardship in the first place, but if there is one, then it doesn't seem like it would be created by the applicant.
Any questions on 6? With that, I'll open it up to the public for any comments. You can state your name up at the podium, please, and address.
I'm just trying to follow up on this now. The structure is just going to be mainly for storage?
Yes.
Is it just for the boat?
Not just for the boat. We have a brush hog, lawnmower, snowblower.
Yeah. And you're going to build it on the, towards the west side of your house? Going towards Alden Nash?
Yes. Well, it's pretty much almost directly behind our
Right behind it. Okay. All right.
Can I have your name at least?
Pardon?
Your name and address?
Michael Pyrock. I live on 2146 G Drive. I'm 4 homes down from hers. So I'm just curious, more curious on that than anything else. So I'm happy with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bert Vanderbilt, 2204 G Drive, next door neighbor. My concern is that this building doesn't look commercial. We live in a residential neighborhood. We all have, you know, house, garage, and a couple of outbuildings, but it's not commercial. Now, there's commercial way behind us on M21, where right behind their house is the movie theater and then the strip mall, but I just was concerned that it doesn't look like a commercial building.
Come on up.
We already have plans for that. I actually wrote it on there. Our house currently has hardy board siding, you know, it looks like fake cedar. And we're just gonna do that to match so that it looks cute and, you know, it matches our house. We don't want like a big metal pole barn with a couple little windows. So we already planned on that. Thank you.
Perry Beecham, I reside at 924 Riverside, so I'm not next door neighbors and everything, but I think it's, what they're asking, I think is appropriate. I would be supportive of it. I'm probably listening to it, and whether there's, like number one, whether there's a hardship, you know, well, you know, I think it's maybe more appropriate to have the planning commission, you know, like the discussion of different size, you know, depending on the lot size and everything, to allow larger buildings. The only concern that I have for her is, is that going to delay it months and months, because now you've got to go to, you know, the next meeting to discuss it, and then 30 days, I don't know what your rules are, but then typically 30 days when you're going to change something, you got to have another meeting, open meeting scheduled, and then, so I can just, by doing it that way, I can just see it delaying for many, many months, and you know, you're coming up on the building season. I would like to see the council resolve it tonight. Thank you.
I wasn't under the impression that if we approved it, we had to wait for the zoning people.
No, he's talking about if planning goes back and changes the ordinance.
Well, we can do that anyway, can't we?
Yes,
But if we deny it because it,
Right,
then we
yeah.
have to go back.
Right. Let's go back.
Sorry.
Any more public comments? If not, we'll go ahead and close them. Okay, any comments from the council?
I appreciate the two people that spoke, and to my mind, your concerns were both answered. Yeah, they're not building an industrial thing, and it's going to be far away from anybody to see it.
For what it's worth, the zoning ordinance requires accessory buildings to be reasonably compatible with the house anyway, so it wouldn't be permitted, even if it wasn't exactly matching, wouldn't be able to put up just like a steel box. That would be something that we'd notice in our review of it. So what they're planning to match the house sounds perfectly fine.
You can tell there's some passion in the project because she did her research and she's got her neighbors and she's got the aesthetic component down, and she's considering the neighborhood, put her kids inside if they want to have fun. So there's a lot of value to that, I think.
Exactly. I guess then, Andy, do we need to vote on each one of these 6 individually, or what do we have to do next for this?
Ideally, yes. I mean, so what you should at least do is come to, or have the record show that there's kind of consensus. If you feel like all 6 standards are met, then sort of say that, and then there should be a vote on the overall variance, and in that motion you should say that because we find that all 6 standards are met, therefore you grant it. If you don't find that they're met, then you gotta, you know.
I'll look for a motion that all 6 have been granted and we'll move on.
I'll make that motion.
I'll support.
Got to. Can we have a vote, Susan?
Board Member DeVore,
Yes.
Chair Salzweedl,
Yes.
Board Member Yankovic.
Yes.
Board Member Chambers,
Yes.
and Board Member Groves.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you.
So you want to take a 4-minute break or a 5-minute break? We're going to go right in.
It's up to you.
Not, we go right in.
All right. Adjourn your meeting.
Yes, is motion adjourned.
Motion to adjourn the zoning board of appeals at 7:27.
Support?
All in favor, by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, we'll call the council